Wait, so you're saying that Sasquatch is real? And not only are they real, but they can have kids with humans, making hybrids?
Yeah, that's right. The crazy part is they have different clans, and they're super territorial. Some of these groups actually go to war with each other. They are really smart. When members of the tribe get kicked out for different reasons, like trying to take over as the leader, they often go rogue. Sometimes they even start their own tribe of really aggressive Sasquatch with hostile behaviors. There's even a special group that tracks, hunts, and neutralizes these rogue Sasquatch. I think they're called phantoms. They're paramilitary, paranormal hunters, and anomaly neutralizers. There's a story I heard about them tracking a tribe of Sasquatch that kidnapped a family of a husband and 2 kids. It started as a rescue mission, but then it got way stranger. When they found the tribe and eliminated them, they found hybrids, half human, half Bigfoot. The husband was still missing and is believed to have been traded to another hostile group. The 2 human kids were alive, but really traumatized.
And the hybrids?
The hybrids were supposedly taken away in a black helicopter with no markings to some secret place. And I think they're still looking for the husband.
Okay, so, you're saying not only do these other types of hominids and hybrids exist, like Sasquatch, but you didn't even mention where they come from. And, you would think by now there'd be proof, right? Can you explain?
Okay, so, I'm sure you've heard some crazy stuff, they're interdimensional and can, jump in and out of our reality, or even that aliens drop them off and pick them up for experiments. That's why, in many reports, there have been UFO sightings along with Sasquatch sightings. There's another theory, which is really bizarre, that aliens use Bigfoot bodies to, roam the Earth because of their physical capabilities. So, Sasquatch are really just artificial bodies controlled by extraterrestrial visitors. I can't really confirm or deny any of those ideas. What I can say is humanity supposedly evolved in 6 million years, which is a super short time. Too short for such an advanced species like us to go from simple organisms to upright walking beings building spaceships. So if you look at the ancient texts of the first civilization, the Sumerians, in the story called the Book of Adapa, also known as the Real Adam, these humanoid extraterrestrials came to Earth and genetically changed our primate ancestors' DNA. About 250,000 years ago, they added, and I quote, their essence to ours, but they weren't perfect. They weren't the almighty creator, so they made mistakes. In the text, there were versions before us that had faces full of hair like beasts and could only grunt.
I saw the agents moving and hiding that Bigfoot. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I saw that night and why I can't keep quiet anymore. For years, I convinced myself it was better to stay silent, to protect myself and my family. But the truth has a way of eating at you from the inside out. And I've reached the point where I need to tell someone what really happened. Back in the early 2000s, I worked as an archival technician for a government contractor. Not one of the big names you'd recognize, just a mid-size firm that handled overflow work for various federal agencies. My job was simple and boring. Take old analog tapes from the 80s and 90s and digitize them so they could be stored properly. Most of it was mind-numbing stuff like training videos, safety briefings, meeting recordings. Nothing classified, nothing exciting. Just hours and hours of grainy footage that nobody would ever watch again. The work was contract-based, which meant I'd go weeks without anything to do, then suddenly get a rush job with hundreds of tapes to process. I didn't ask questions about where they came from or why they needed digitizing. That wasn't my job. My job was to run them through the equipment, check the quality, and upload the files to whatever server they specified. Easy money. And it let me work from home most of the time. I had a whole setup in my spare bedroom. 2 professional-grade tape decks, a couple of monitors, a decent computer with way too much hard drive space, and enough cables to make any IT person jealous. The room always smelled faintly of dust and old electronics. I'd sit there for 8 or 9 hours at a time, headphones on, watching decades-old footage play across my screens while I made sure the transfer quality was acceptable. Most tapes were exactly what the label said they were. Forest Service training on wildfire prevention, Bureau of Land Management surveys of grazing lands, park ranger orientation videos, the kind of content that was important when it was made, but now just sat in storage gathering dust. My job was to make sure it didn't disappear entirely when the tapes degraded beyond recovery. I got paid by the tape, not by the hour, which meant I could work as fast or as slow as I wanted. Some contractors tried to rush through everything, but I took pride in the quality of my work. If there was audio distortion or video artifacts, I'd note it in my report. If a tape was damaged, I'd do my best to salvage what.
In a careful and almost forensic breakdown of a mysterious walking figure captured on video, the narrator analyzes the movement step by step, focusing on the biomechanics of its gait to understand whether it resembles a human, an animal, or something unusual. The explanation begins with the basic concept of stride length, defined as the distance between 2 points where the same foot touches the ground again, essentially marking one full cycle of movement. When that distance is divided in half, it becomes the step length, which represents the distance between the contact of one foot and then the other. From there, the narrator explains cadence, which refers to the number of steps taken per minute, noting that the figure in the footage does not appear to be moving particularly fast, instead maintaining what looks like a normal or slightly accelerated walking pace. At one point, the creature briefly turns its head back, something the narrator refuses to label as abnormal, because different animals respond to human presence in different ways. Some immediately flee, while others simply observe before continuing on their path. However, the deeper analysis begins when the narrator studies the posture and mechanics of the figure AES walk. A key observation centers around the mid-stance phase of the gait cycle, the moment when one leg bears the body AES full weight while the other swings forward. Under normal human biomechanics, the supporting leg should straighten almost completely during mid-stance, entering a neutral position that stabilizes the body. Yet in this footage, the narrator notices that the supporting leg appears to remain slightly bent rather than straight, which is unusual. He acknowledges that the terrain in the video looks uneven, and walking on rough ground can cause increased knee flexion as the body instinctively protects the joint and absorbs impact more effectively, making the bent leg somewhat understandable. Even so, the pattern remains intriguing. Another detail that draws attention is the figure AES hip flexion and posture. Instead of standing upright in a typical human gait, the figure leans forward slightly at the hips. In biomechanics, hip flexion refers to the forward bending of the torso, while hip extension would involve leaning backward. This forward-leaning posture is not commonly seen in a healthy, relaxed walking pattern, though it can appear in certain groups such as older adults or individuals compensating for balance or muscular issues. The narrator explains these movements through simple analogies, comparing the bending of joints to flexing a bicep. When a muscle contracts, the joint bends, and when it extends, the limb straightens. By translating the idea to the hamstrings and knees, he helps viewers visualize how the body controls motion during walking. Throughout the breakdown, the tone remains analytical rather than sensational, focusing on observable details like joint angles, stride mechanics, and posture rather than jumping to conclusions about what the creature might be. Each frame is examined as if it were part of a biomechanical study, raising subtle questions about whether the motion patterns match those of a human navigating rough ground or something moving with a slightly different anatomical structure. By the end of the explanation, the viewer is left with a sense that the movement contains both familiar and unusual elements, normal enough to resemble human walking in cadence and stride pattern, yet different enough in knee flexion, posture, and weight distribution to spark curiosity and debate about what exactly. A few months ago, I came across some trail camera footage online that stopped me in my tracks. The post showed 2 short clips of what appeared to be a massive Bigfoot walking through the woods in broad daylight, captured on motion-activated cameras positioned near someone's remote cabin. The original poster claimed this creature had walked directly toward his property, and that same day he heard heavy footsteps circling his cabin from multiple directions. Then, just as mysteriously as the footage appeared, the poster vanished from the forum with no follow-up, no additional evidence, and no explanation. What I saw in those clips has haunted me ever since. I want to walk you through what this footage shows, what the original poster claim happened, and why this case bothers me more than most Bigfoot sightings I've researched over the years. Something about these clips feels different from the usual grainy, questionable videos that circulate online, but the lack of follow-up raises serious questions about authenticity. Is this genuine footage of an unknown creature, or is there something else going on here? Let me break it down for you. The original poster explained that he had 3 trail cameras positioned around his property in a heavily forested area. These cameras were motion-activated, set to record short clips whenever movement triggered the sensors. The first clip he shared runs for 10 seconds total, though the Bigfoot itself is only visible for about 3 seconds of that footage. This is actually a common issue with trail cameras, and it's important to understand why. Motion detection cameras don't start recording instantly. There's a delay between when something enters the detection zone and when the camera actually begins capturing footage. Usually this lag is just a second or 2, but it means the camera often catches subjects mid-action rather than from the beginning. In this case, the Bigfoot was probably already walking through the detection zone when the camera triggered. So by the time recording started, the creature was already partway through the frame. What the footage shows is striking. This is daytime footage, not night vision, which immediately makes it more valuable than most trail camera captures. The lighting is natural forest daylight filtering through the trees, creating that dappled effect you get in wooded areas. A large dark figure walks through the frame from right to left at a steady. For over 60 years, people have been asking the wrong question about Bigfoot. They've been focused on proving whether it exists, hunting for that one perfect photograph, that undeniable footprint, that body that would silence all the skeptics once and for all. But what if the real mystery isn't whether Bigfoot is real? What if the mystery is understanding what it actually is? David Pades, a former detective, spent nearly 2 decades investigating this phenomenon, and what he uncovered challenges everything researchers thought they knew. The evidence doesn't point to a simple, undiscovered ape hiding in North America's forests. Instead, it suggests something far more complex, something that operates according to rules science hasn't fully grasped yet. The question that should have been asked all along isn't about existence. It's about nature. Because when someone with 20 years of law enforcement experience, someone trained to follow evidence and identify patterns, someone who's made a career out of separating truth from fiction, when that person investigates Bigfoot and comes away saying the phenomenon is real but not what anyone expected, people need to pay attention. This isn't about belief or faith. This is about following where the evidence actually leads, even when it leads somewhere uncomfortable. Most Bigfoot researchers come to the subject as enthusiasts, as believers looking to confirm what they already suspect. David Pades approached it differently. After retiring from 2 decades in law enforcement, working everything from SWAT operations to complex criminal investigations, he brought a detective's mindset to one of America's most enduring mysteries. His goal wasn't to prove Bigfoot exists. His goal was to understand what the evidence actually showed. The investigation began in Northern California, in areas where sightings had been reported for generations. Rather than chasing fresh reports or setting up cameras hoping to capture footage, the approach was methodical and patient. Interview witnesses, gather physical evidence, look for patterns, apply the same investigative techniques used in criminal cases to a mystery that had frustrated researchers for decades. What emerged from thousands of interviews and field investigations was a picture far more complex than anyone anticipated. The physical evidence was there, plenty of it. Footprints showing anatomical features that couldn't be faked. Hair samples that I should have died in those mountains. Any rational analysis of what happened during that October night in 1983 leads to the same conclusion. 2 young soldiers alone in the wilderness, face to face with something that could have torn them apart without effort. Instead, I'm sitting in my suburban home 40 years later, writing words I was ordered never to speak about an encounter that officially never happened. The classified after-action report buried in some Pentagon filing cabinet lists our training exercise as completed without incident. 2 Army Reserve personnel completed advanced land navigation and survival drills in Chattahoochee National Forest, Georgia. Event logged per training protocol. No further action required. But I remember the eyes 8 ft off the ground, reflecting moonlight like polished glass, studying us with an intelligence that made every hair on my body stand at attention. I remember footprints in the morning earth that were 18 in long and 5 toes wide. I remember the smell, musky, organic alien that lingered in our campsite long after the creature had melted back into shadows that seemed too deep for the available light. Most of all, I remember the commanding officer who told us that unusual reports from training exercises serve no useful military purpose and could damage a soldier's career prospects. The message was delivered with the kind of quiet authority that transforms memories into classified secrets, experiences into things that never happened. 40 years of silence. 40 years of carrying a story that sounds like fiction but felt more real than anything before or since. 40 years of wondering if I was the only one who remembered that night when the impossible revealed itself to 2 young men who were just trying to prove they belonged in the ranks of the Rangers. Then 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call that changed everything. A voice I hadn't heard in decades. Rougher now, but unmistakably familiar. My former partner reaching across 40 years of enforced silence with news that made my blood run cold. It's happening again. The disappearances, the strange reports, the carefully worded official explanations that say nothing while implying everything. And this time, people are asking questions that military protocol can't answer. This is the story they never wanted told. The story of 2 encounters separated by 14 years, but connected by something far older and more complex than human understanding.
My God. That's its face, eyes shut. It's not moving. I'm going to back up so you can see how big this thing really is. Look at the shoulders. The arms, from head to toe, must be 8-9 FT easy. It's giant. This grainy video clip showing what appears to be a dead Bigfoot in the Missouri wilderness has haunted me since the moment I first saw it online. The hunter who filmed it vanished from the internet shortly after posting, leaving behind more questions than answers. This is my attempt to piece together what happened, why this footage exists, and what it might mean for everyone who has ever wondered if Sasquatch is real. This is the footage I found online. I have no idea if real or not, and there are many more like this one. The shoulders are enormous, way wider than any linebacker I've ever seen. It looks heavy, like real dead weight sinking into the dirt, not some stiff foam suit holding its own shape. The guy estimates 8 or 9 ft, and looking at how those massive arms are just flopped on the ground, I believe him. But it brings us back to the same old problem that drives me crazy. If this is a genuine body, where did it go? Did he run away and leave the discovery of the century to rot? Or is this another one of those bodies that supposedly just vanished before the experts could get there? The video is short, maybe 45 seconds at most. Whoever filmed it was breathing hard like someone who just ran through thick brush or climbed over fallen logs. The camera shakes as it pans across the forest floor. And then, there it is, the body. Dark fur, matted and dirty. Face down in the leaves, one arm stretched out to the side, the other tucked underneath. The cameraman mutters something about the size, about how this changes everything. And then the footage cuts out. I have watched this clip probably 300 times. Every time I see it, I notice something new. The way the fur moves slightly in the wind, the massive width of the back, the length of those arms. If this is a hoax, it is the most expensive and elaborate hoax I have ever seen. We are talking about a custom-made suit that would cost tens of thousands of dollars with realistic proportions that do not match any gorilla costume on the market. But if it is real, then why is this not front-page news? Why has no scientific team investigated the site? The video was originally posted on a hunting forum in late autumn a few years back. The username has since been deleted.
Bigfoot is real, and not only real but also very intelligent. And although the one I met was extremely intelligent and kind, he made me understand that his species is like ours, full of both good apples and bad ones. He showed me things that made me realize that in Northern California there exists a giant Bigfoot larger than the one I met that hunts hikers like me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me first tell you how I came to meet this kind Bigfoot. I've done a lot of crazy things in my life. I've base jumped off cliffs in Norway where one wrong move means you're dead before you hit the ground. I've free climbed rock faces in Yosemite without ropes, trusting only my fingers and toes to keep me alive, hundreds of feet in the air. I've surfed 20-foot waves in Hawaii that could snap my spine like a twig. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've cave dived in underwater systems where you can't see your hand in front of your face. I spent nights alone in the Australian outback where everything wants to kill you. I'm what you'd call an adrenaline junkie. I've always needed that rush, that feeling of dancing on the edge between life and death. My friends think I'm crazy. My family has stopped trying to talk sense into me, but that feeling of pure life you get when you're doing something dangerous, when your body is flooded with adrenaline, every sense heightened, and you feel more real than you ever have, that's what I live for. That's what I chase. But nothing I had ever done prepared me for what I found on the trail in Northern California. Nothing could have prepared me for that. DeVos Creek has a reputation, and it's a bad one. More than 40 hikers have gone missing there in just the past decade. 40 people who walked into those woods and never walked back out. Their cars were found at the trailhead, their gear sometimes turned up scattered through the forest. But the people themselves vanished without a trace. No bodies, no answers. They just disappeared. Most people stay far away from the place. Locals in nearby towns whisper about it while drinking beers in dark bars, trading stories they've heard from friends. Rangers working the area warn hikers not to go too deep into the woods. They tell you to stay on marked trails, never camp overnight past the 3-mile marker, always tell someone where you're going and when you'll be back. The warnings are severe and frequent, but I went there specifically because of the danger. I had read
The Klamath Falls Bigfoot encounter, based off eyewitness accounts from trainees of the National Guard. It was 1997. Late autumn. Cold air had already crept into the valleys surrounding Klamath Falls, Oregon, a region dense with pine forests, volcanic soil, and shadowed ridgelines that swallow sound. A small team of Oregon National Guard trainees had been deployed to the region for a multi-day survival and navigation exercise. The mission was standard. Operate in teams of 2, navigate through rough terrain, build your own shelters, and radio back at designated check-ins. No contact unless it was an emergency. The instructors called it a mental toughness test. But what these soldiers encountered didn't come from a handbook. On day 2, one of the trainee pairs, a 21-year-old named Jackson and his buddy Ramos, set up camp just below a ridgeline near a dry creek bed. It was a quiet zone, miles from the others. The only sound was wind pushing through the pines. Around 3:30 a.m., Jackson was jolted awake by heavy footfalls. Not a deer, not an elk. These weren't the delicate steps of animals. They were deliberate, heavy, bipedal. Ramos whispered, "Do you hear that?" Then came the wood knocks. 2 hard knocks. Then silence. Then another, from farther down the ravine. The men stayed low in their sleeping bags, each gripping their issued K-bar knives, unsure what protocol was for. This. On day 3, after a tense morning of second-guessing themselves, they shook it off and began their navigation checkpoint. While climbing toward a saddle in the ridgeline, Jackson froze mid-step. Across the ridge, maybe 100 yards away, stood a massive figure, upright, dark, motionless. At first, he thought it was another soldier in a ghillie suit, until it turned its head. It had no gear, no rifle, no ruck, just massive shoulders, long arms that reached its knees. The outline was bulky, like a refrigerator wrapped in thick black fur. Ramos whispered, "That ain't one of us." They crouched, trying not to move. The figure didn't run. It stared for what felt like an eternity, then walked off into the timber, covering ground fast, with a gait they both described as unnatural but smooth. On day 4, the trainees relayed their story to one of the supervising sergeants back at base, a combat vet who didn't laugh. Instead, he pulled them aside privately and asked them to draw what they saw. After reviewing it, the sergeant said, "That part of the woods. We've had reports before. Don't talk about this over comms." That same day, a third trainee from another unit claimed to have captured something on a trail cam. A shadowed silhouette crossing a game trail on 2 legs. The camera and SD card were quickly collected by a superior officer. The photo was never seen again. No formal debriefing, no report filed. The next morning, they were rotated to a new zone, far from that ridge. Years later, one of the soldiers, now retired, posted anonymously in a military survival forum. "We weren't the only ones who saw it. One of the instructors used to call it the Watcher of the Hills. He said it wasn't dangerous, unless you tracked it. Said the native tribes had names for it long before the Guard ever trained there. Klamath tribal members, when asked privately, referred to Kachek, meaning the one who moves without sound." If you enjoyed the retelling of this encounter story, please support my page by liking and following, and let me know in the comments what you think a Bigfoot is.
My grandma always used to tell me that nothing good happens between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. She would say those are the devil hours. Do not go out during that time. And, I always tell people, if you don't believe any of this stuff, right, go out after midnight into the woods alone and then tell me what you think. Now, many years ago when I was younger, I had just gotten out of the military and I was kind of adjusting to this regular civilian life. Now, one of the things that helped me is I got into doing outdoor survival. Now, I used to do these 4 to 5 mile backpacking hikes where I would go out sometimes 12:30, 1 o'clock at night and hike in the woods. This particular area that I would hike was along the river. It was like this hill and it was just this heavily wooded area. Now, at the time, right, this area was known to be home to the Peoria Indians. And this is where they hunted. This is where they lived. There's even believed to be this huge burial ground on this area that was never found. So this particular night, I decided to hike this trail called the Pimatui. Now, the Pimatui was an old Native American trail they used to use to get down this hill to the river. So what I would do is I would hike this trail, and I would get to this specific spot where there was a stream that cut through the trail. I would then turn right, and I would follow this stream through a ravine down to the river. So as I'm hiking the Pimatui Trail, I come to the stream, I turn right, and I start following along down this ravine. I start hearing like music, and it sounded like someone was singing, but it wasn't like a person. It was like one of those old music boxes. And as I kept on walking further and further, like it got a little louder and then a little louder. And that's when I get to the specific spot of the stream where it kind of makes a curve, and there's this sharp ravine with two steep sides on both sides. And I remember hearing this music like coming from the side of this cliff. And I'm like, what is making that music? Like, where is that coming from? And that's when I see like this opening on the side of the ravine. And, you know, it was probably about this wide. You could, you know, barely crawl through it. And it was some kind of cave or something. So I hiked up to the top of this hill, and I started shining my light into this cave. As I look in there, I see the movement of something very large. And I don't exactly know what it was. I can't explain to you what it looked like, but it caused me to like jump back. And at the time I'm thinking, okay, if this is some kind of wild animal, I'm blocking its only exit. So I started making my way back up the ravine and heading away from there. And as I'm walking, I notice like all this movement up ahead in the woods. And I see several deer just booking it through the woods like something had just scared it. And I could hear from behind me some movement coming up through the woods. And there were like branches breaking, and you know, you could hear the crunch of something hitting the leaves. I go a little faster now because I'm kind of nervous. I'm like, what is following me? As I'm, you know, continuing up the ravine, it starts getting closer and closer. And it got to the point where I knew that it was very, very close. So I pull my camera out and I take a picture with the flash on. And when that flash hit, I could see two glowing eyes staring at me. So I threw my bag down and I just take off running as fast as I can. I get to the trail, I get out of there. And whatever this was, you know, it broke off and didn't follow me. Later that night, you know, I'm looking at this picture and you could clearly see the two eyes. And I'm like, whoa, something was following me, whatever was in that cave. The next day, I hiked back out to this area because I wanted to find this cave again. Except I could not find it anywhere. And I went all the way along that ravine down to the river. There was no cave. And I still to this day have no idea what happened that night or what was following me.